we've all been following the FTX story super closely. You have some exclusive reporting on it. But first, before we get to that, Sam Bankman-Fried has been in a series of high-profile media appearances this week. Can you give us a sense of what he said in those?
Yeah, so Sam Bankman-Fried has been sort of talking all throughout the collapse of his crypto empire, and this week he's really been talking. And so he was on Good Morning America. He had an appearance at a New York Times conference, and an article in New York Magazine came out that was an interview with him. And the gist of what he's basically said is, he messed up, and he messed up bad. But it was sort of an honest mistake, sort of a series of bad decisions and maybe some unclear accounting, things of that nature that have resulted in, tremendous losses for his customers and for his investors. But so far, he's sort of pushed back on the narrative that maybe he committed fraud, or he was knowingly trying to trade customers money and maybe or make off with their money.
And what has been the response to his claims of oops?
Yeah, it's been it's been sort of mixed. I think there's sort of two strains out there, two predominant strains, where one camp sort of sees it as maybe a couple of really notable people have come out and said that. Hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman said something along the lines of "call me crazy, but I believe the guy." And Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank was a paid spokesperson of FTX, and he came out and said sort of the same thing, which is I believe him. On the other side of the spectrum, there are a lot of angry people who say this whole thing has been a Ponzi scheme from the start, and you can't trust a word that comes out of his mouth.
I just want to get a sense of, is this normal for someone to be involved in this level of fraud, to be so vocal? I mean, he was tweeting about it, and now he's doing these series of really high-profile interviews.
Yeah, I would say that none of this is normal. I mean, crypto itself is sort of been a big change, and the way that he made his fortune and how quickly he made his fortune, none of that was normal. And part of what it has maybe been a little bit endearing to customers and investors and maybe regulators too, and sort of everybody, is that Sam Bankman-Fried wasn't normal. He was sort of you hear the stereotype of tech billionaires, tech people, wearing t-shirts and not wearing suits and things like that. But Sam Bankman-Fried was sort of a step farther, I guess. So it's never been normal. But the way that this all has blown up is not really normal. And certainly his response, to everything is not normal. I mean, he made a remark. They asked him about it at the New York Times conference, and whether his lawyers thought it was a good idea that he was speaking, and he said definitely not. And that's definitely when you get to this stage, most people start listening to their lawyers and start thinking about the criminal liability and whether they might end up in jail, whether they might end up mired in tons of civil lawsuits, let alone criminal trials. And Sam Bankman-Fried has sort of said, his explanation is, I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about ways that I can help. But whatever the motivations are, he's been out talking when pretty much nobody would advise that he goes out and talks. So definitely not normal.
Yeah, usually people would just opt for the no comment here, I think. But I do want to get into some specifics of what he is saying. So can you tell us his explanation for how both Alameda and FTX declared bankruptcy?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of pieces that are still sort of up in the air. And yet to be determined. And but the gist of it is that Sam Bankman-Fried had two major businesses, one of them being FTX, which was a cryptocurrency exchange, and there was a separate US arm of that business. And then he had a crypto hedge fund called Alameda Research, and it was sort of a hedge fund, sort of a trading firm, always a little bit secretive, never super clear what they were doing, and what the relationship between the two parties was. And for years, people have speculated about it and asked about it. And so what ended up happening last month is both of them filed for bankruptcy. And I think there are a lot of details that are yet to come out. And even the bankruptcy team that's going through and trying to figure this all out has said that they've never seen something that's such a mess before. And so they don't really have a good hold on it. I mean, from what it sounds like, FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried didn't even really know where all the money was at any given point in time. So it's really hard to figure out exactly what happened. But so far, the sort of the rough contour of it is that it seems that Alameda lost a lot of money making trades, making investments, things like that. And they had somehow managed to borrow money or were given money that were customer deposits from FTX to sort of help paper over those losses. And the whole thing sort of fell down like a house of cards from there. And there have been sort of the nuances of that will be what determines whether Sam Bankman-Fried ends up on trial or not, and things like that. So that's all sort of yet to come out. But the big gist of it is it looks like Alameda lost a lot of money, and there might have been some commingling of funds there where customers might be out their money that was sort of sent to try to prop up Alameda, as it failed.
Sam Bankman-Fried said he was only surface level involved in Alameda's finances, but you have exclusive reporting that proves otherwise. Can you expand?
Yeah, in his recent interviews, he's one of the big parts, his claim about Alameda losing money and all of that, the way that he's sort of started to sketch out an explanation for how he sees what happened is that Alameda basically took on a huge amount of leverage and using the FTX platform, and FTX didn't spot it, didn't prevent them from taking on such debt, and so that sort of toppled, everything sort of came caving in. And so his explanation is sort of an explanation where he wasn't paying close enough attention, and he didn't want to be involved in Alameda because of the potential conflicts of interest, and that's not a business that he had been running for the last year or two, and all of that. And I think it's clear that he was focusing a lot of his energy on FTX and maybe not very much energy on Alameda. I think that might be true, but a big part of his claim is that he didn't really have any idea what was going on at Alameda, and we really don't know how involved he was. I think that's all sort of yet to be determined and yet to come out, but I'm sure that it will. But what I found is in working on Forbes' net worth valuation of Sam Bankman-Fried over the last couple of years, I've been in contact with him, and over all this time, he was frequently sending us information on Alameda's holdings, some of Alameda's holdings, at least, what they were worth, how they were changing over time, and why. And so, in 2021, for example, he's telling us specifically, Alameda holds 3 billion and 14 million something tokens of this cryptocurrency, and they hold this many of this. And if the number went up or down, at one point he explained, well, we were buying some in the market and then we sold some, and so this is the result of that. And then he even explained a sort of complicated transaction where FTX bought out Binance, which is part of what led to this whole downfall. Sam Bankman-Fried's relationship with Binance, and explained how in detail how Alameda was involved in that, and how FTT tokens were involved in all of that. So he got really into the specifics, and as recently as just late August, I was having a conversation with him on this topic, and he was updating the prices and telling me how many shares, or how many tokens rather, of FTT, Solana, and Serum in particular, three big tokens that Alameda held a lot of. He was telling us how many he had, and what the market price of that was. So whether he was intimately aware of everything that Alameda was doing, certainly they were doing complicated transactions. They were doing a lot of derivatives, doing a lot of really complicated stuff. And what he was portraying, what he was telling Forbes about, was not those complicated things that Alameda seems to have been doing, and apparently taking on a ton of debt while doing it. So whether he was involved in all of that and knew that, it still sort of remains to be seen. But what we can say from the Forbes reporting is the idea that he didn't know anything that was going on at Alameda, or that he really wasn't aware. We have a few data points that show at least a baseline. He definitely knew, how much FTT Alameda had. He definitely knew how much Solana and Serum, they had. And he definitely knew, at least last year, about specific trades that they were making and why and what the effects of that, sort of were. So sort of, we don't know everything, but this is, an important baseline to say, at the very least, he definitely must have known this because he was telling Forbes about it in an effort to help us, determine his net worth.
Yeah, from what you're describing from your reporting, that sounds more than surface level when you're sending that type of information to a company, right?
Yeah. I mean, you would think. I mean, we don't know the depths of what was going on below the surface. So who knows how deep he was really going and how deep it actually went. But he was a big shareholder. He owns 90% of Alameda, and he knew some intimate details, and he was still talking about them as of just a couple of months ago. And and I asked him for more information in August before all of this, all the troubles at Alameda and FTX broke, and before everything came crashing down. We were asking him for a lot more detail on what exactly does Alameda own, what exactly, what debt is on Alameda's books, what debt do you owe personally, what debt does FTX owe. And so we asked him about that information, and he said, "I'm working on it, and I'm looking into, specifically his coin holdings, and said it's in a lot of wallets, but I'm looking into it." And so, if he did actually look into it, in August, he didn't get back to us, which he's been doing a lot of talking, and he typically is pretty talkative, but he didn't get back to us there. If he did look into it, does that mean that he found out some information about Alameda a month plus, before he is now claiming that he started to find out that information? I mean, it is definitely an interesting question.